Hi, welcome to CinemaSpection. I'm Tim.
I'm Corinne.
In this episode, we're heading into the jungle and collecting skulls. We ain't got time to bleed, but we got time to discuss the sci-fi action thriller Predator from 1987.
Deep in the jungle, where nothing that lives is safe.
You lose it here, you're in a world of hurt.
Showtime, kid.
Knock, knock.
An elite rescue squad is being led by the ultimate warrior.
We need the best. That's why you're here.
But now,
What's got Billy so spooked? There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man.
they're up against the ultimate enemy.
Holy Mother of God.
Nothing like it has ever been on Earth before.
She says the jungle just came alive and took him.
It kills for pleasure.
He was skinned alive.
It hunts for sport.
He's killing us one at a time.
But this time, it's picked the wrong man to hunt.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Predator.
Dutch Schaefer and his Special Forces unit are a crack rescue team, ready to deploy in any environment against any enemy. But while on a mission into the jungles of Central America to retrieve a missing cabinet minister, they find themselves in a situation unlike anything they've encountered. First, their assignment is revealed to be a ruse, a trick by Dutch's CIA colleague Dylan to carry out the agency's bloody intelligence work. But worse yet, there's a mysterious presence in the jungle, an alien creature who begins picking off Dutch's team one by one, hunting them for sport. Finally, only Dutch is left to face the creature in a showdown that pits the Predator's monstrous strength and superior technology against Dutch's wits and endurance. As usual, we'll be discussing Predator in detail, so if you haven't seen the movie and wish to remain unspoiled, we recommend watching the film before listening to the rest of this episode. Predator was released by 20th Century Fox on June 12, 1987, where it opened against The Witches of Eastwick and The Believers. It was shot on a budget of $18 million and made $98.3 million at the box office, worldwide. It was nominated for a Visual Effects Oscar at the 1988 Academy Awards, and it won a Saturn Award for Alan Silvestri's music score. It was also nominated for Best Dramatic Presentation at the 1988 Hugos. Okay, Corinne, so what's your first experience with Predator?
This is the first time I've seen the movie all the way through. I saw bits and pieces of it when I was a kid, and then most recently we were at a 24-hour sci-fi movie marathon, and about 10 minutes into this movie, sometime around 4 a.m., I think it was, I tapped out. I had to sleep. So we had a do-over tonight.
But have you seen at least the Predator in other movies? Some of the other things in the series?
Absolutely. You know, Alien versus Predator is fantastic. So I've definitely seen the Predator in action. It's
funny, when this first came out, I thought it was just a straight Arnold Schwarzenegger shoot 'em up, and I wasn't really into those then, so it wasn't really on my radar as a kid.
That was my problem with it too. I always saw it and saw, oh, it's a military movie. I have no interest in that.
I remember reading some article about Harry and the Hendersons, and it mentioned Kevin Peter Hall as the alien in Predator, and my brain went, alien? That's weird. And I just kind of forgot about it. Then it was on HBO one night, and as we watched it, I started to realize, oh, this is a monster movie. Okay, I can do this. I can get into this. Great. It was a couple of years before I really got into shoot 'em up action as, oh yeah, this is fun too. For me, it was all just monsters. So once there was a creature in it, I was totally sold.
Yeah, there's something about the way the movie was framed a bit that I wish it had been slightly different. We get a pre-credit scene of the alien ship kind of splitting off, falling into Earth. However that happens, we never find out. But I almost wish we hadn't had that.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, and that we'd just gone into this movie cold, thinking it was going to be a military operation to go rescue some people, and then, surprise, there's a monster.
Because the first thing you see is the thermal camera, and you can imagine, all right, maybe these soldiers have some really tricked out gear, and they're tracking these guys.
some high-tech stuff.
It's not really until you see the Predator's hand when it picks up the scorpion and start to realize, all right, that looks like a monster hand.
I think that would have been an incredible reveal, and it may have been intended that way, but they had to maybe reshoot because of the opposite issue. Maybe it tested a little negatively.
I remember reading the original script, and it doesn't have the alien ship scene. It just starts off with them arriving on the beach. So yeah, I really wish they had gone that way. There's so many movies that seem to have that mid-movie genre switch, and so often it's kind of spoiled in trailers.
Yeah, or pre-credit spoiler, like a flash in the future that you just spend the whole movie waiting for it to get to that point. And I just feel like a lot of these hooks aren't necessary. I'm here. My butt is in the seat. I'm ready to watch the movie. Let it get there.
I keep thinking of like From Dusk Till Dawn. If you had sat down to that not knowing it was going to be a vampire movie, how amazing that movie would have been once that hits.
Yeah, or I was thinking specifically of Don't Breathe. We get a pre-title scare and horrific stuff, and then the movie just starts out as a bunch of teenagers doing their thing. I just wish that the movies, or, you know, the people making the movies would trust the audience enough to be able to sit and let the movie get there.
Yeah, audiences can be patient as long as it's worth the ride.
Yeah, exactly. There are many, many slow burns I've waited through for like that 5-minute, oh my God moment. And Predator missed out on that. Just is so close. They just did not need that extra bit of information. I would have understood based on his gear and his physicality that, okay, well, this is something that's very high tech, advanced at some point. And then, of course, you've got the big reveal of the face, and that would be the moment where you're like, no, this is totally alien.
I mean, once you see that camouflage shape in the jungle, you realize, okay, this is something different.
Well, definitely. It's high tech at that point. You can write it off as just, oh, well, there's some military operation out here that has some really advanced technology. And even the hand you could put off a little bit as, well, that's a very strange glove or gauntlet. It would have been so wonderful for the movie to have unfolded with different understandings of what this creature is before we get the reveal that this is an alien. This isn't just a monster. This is not terrestrial.
I find in a lot of movies, and we see it in other aspects of this movie, it's so much stronger if you make the discoveries with the characters.
Yes.
Like when they find Jim Hopper and his army team's bodies skinned, when they find what's left of Hawkins, these things of, oh, you better take a look at this, and we see it and go, oh my God, the same as them. When Mac first really sees the camouflage predator, and we have that moment of, oh my God, that's bizarre and cool. And I think the big reveal of, oh, it's an alien movie, if we had left it with the characters as they're starting to realize, all right, this isn't a human, this is something bizarre, it would have been so much stronger.
Yeah, there are times when that can backfire. I'm thinking Prometheus.
Well, at least that one, you know the genre you're going into when you sit down. Because when it first starts out, and I'll even say this, that first big action scene where they attack the rebel camp, I really don't like that scene.
It's dull.
It's not well directed.
Yeah.
And the director, John McTiernan, even admits that because he didn't shoot a lot of it.
I almost feel like they knew they weren't doing a military rescue mission movie, so it didn't matter what this scene looked like. Unfortunately, it really, really matters. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dutch, has this line, "You dropped all of us into a meat grinder." And meanwhile, there's no meat grinder. There's like no stakes in this battle on the fort. Yes, one of them gets a little wounded, but he ain't got time to bleed. You know, and Schwarzenegger goes in there and he lifts up the truck and the battle is pretty much over at that point. There's some mopping up they have to do, but it's not a meat grinder. The most horrific thing they've seen so far are the skinned humans that they're attributing to this band of gorilla who they vanquished within 10 minutes. So I don't see how there's any sort of purpose to this scene. I want to feel some real stakes if you're going to try to sell this as an action war alien film.
See, I could see the purpose of the scene and how it could have worked. I think this should have been our scene to show how good these guys are in terms of, like, when they first are stealthing the guys around the edge of the camp, pulling out the machine gun nest.
Even then, it's not that great.
Well, that I'm okay with because at least, okay, we see the strategy. But my big problem...
Dutch slithering down the side of the hill, I was laughing because it was not graceful at all. And there is such a certain amount of grace that comes with that kind of stealth because you have to be so quiet because it's very important that every move is measured. And the gorillas should have heard him coming from that distance because he's just going through the dried leaves. Like,
well, he does his little his power slide. See, I like their little weird slide.
It's cute. It looks like fun, but it looks like if I was a 7 or an 8-year-old playing at Predator and slithering down my backyard hill.
See, I can forgive that because they have that generator on the car thing going on, so they probably wouldn't have heard anything from that distance, like leaves rustling. My big problem is the editing. There's one shot of Schwarzenegger running into the main compound, just firing off a shot here, firing off a shot here, and he fires off one, and we see a row of 6 guys in slow motion just suddenly falling.
There was a moment when there was gunfire, and then we had a full 1 second pause before switching and looking at the people who were shot, and then all of a sudden they decide to, oh no, we're shot, so they fall backwards. It's a very awkward editing moment.
A lot of that was shot second unit with these stunt teams that used to do stuff from the A-Team, and it feels like McTiernan had to plug in shots of them with shots of the actors. Towards the second half, when they're running and gunning down that slope in the camp, it gets better, but yeah, it just doesn't work for me.
But that invasion was the Arnold Schwarzenegger show.
Yeah.
And like you said, it should have been a moment for that team to show that they are an elite team. And they weren't. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger lifting up a truck and blowing things up.
Well, and Jesse Ventura running around with his ridiculous minigun. Oh, God, that makes me laugh every time I see that. That thing is meant to be mounted onto a helicopter. You're not supposed to walk around with it. It's just crazy.
Could a person wield such a weapon without the support of the mounting?
It can be done. It took them a while to get it right, and they were very nervous that the thing was going to whip and hit Ventura in the head, or the blanks were going to hit somebody, because it was firing a whole lot of blanks. The funny thing is, the amount of ammunition that you could carry, you could only fire about 5 seconds. He has this kind of metal tin fort on his back that he's carrying around. There is no way he could carry the amount of ammo that would be necessary to do what he does in the movie. In fact, they had to slow down the barrel so it would register on camera because it was going too fast. Now, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 carrying that, I can buy that. He's a robot. Fine.
Yeah.
It's a little tougher here. It just seems like such a ludicrous weapon to take into the jungle.
It is, but that's why I love it, especially for this character who is absurd. I think that Jesse Ventura was the best part of this movie because he was just chewing the hell out of everything, including tobacco, and he was as big as the movie was at that point. I mean, we've already gone through a movie where old buddies meeting again have an over-the-top arm wrestling moment. We've had people jumping out of choppers, throwing their gear out, listening to the radio. Like, this is an over-the-top film, and I almost feel like Jesse Ventura's character should have been Dutch.
Oh, God. I wouldn't have been able to stand this movie if that was the case.
It changes the tone of things. It definitely makes it a little more pulpy, I guess, is the only way to phrase it. Not necessarily tongue-in-cheek, but just enjoying the kind of movie it is. Basically, it almost makes it into like a Conan the Barbarian movie, where it's very self-conscious of what type of movie it is.
It's just, on his part, though, it's so much macho posturing. I just can't wait until he gets killed in the movie. Oh, he's an asshole.
He is an asshole. He is. I agree. But I love all the posturing. His stupid phrases. He says so many just stupid things.
Son of a bitch is dug in like an Alabama tick.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
And Schwarzenegger does too. He has a lot of one-liners like knock knock as he's blowing a hole through a door. Just stupid one-liners. And yes, I'm thinking back, and there are some not okay things that his character says.
Well, that's a lot of what kind of hits me with that.
Most of that was toward the beginning. Granted, he doesn't have too many lines, thankfully, because if he said a lot of the things he was saying, some homophobic slurs and a lot of very not okay stuff.
I guess the other difference is when Schwarzenegger says a one-liner, it just feels like it's some kind of a little plainful one-off. Whenever Blaine says something, it's this really kind of self-aggrandizing macho silliness, like, you could be a sexual tyrannosaurus like me.
So
and
funny.
I'm like, Predator, please take this dude's skull. Take it now, please. When he gets it in the, pretty early, I'm like, oh, thank God, now I can relax.
What would have topped that off? Okay, so in my scenario where the Jesse Ventura Blaine character is Dutch, in the end of the film, as he's lifted off with the helicopter, he's got a giant American flag just streaming out of the back. Because that's what it feels like. That's what this kind of movie feels like to me.
Ugh.
Could you imagine all that posturing for the whole movie and using
No.
the Predator, who is basically our insert for an other? It's the 80s, so it's probably going to be Russian or, the other that you're trying to beat as an American. And so there's just this like ridiculous pomp around it where I feel like they could have pushed a little further.
See, one of the things I kind of like about the movie is that, yes, the Predator is an other, but to me it's also a case of them being hunted by this kind of super version of themselves. The Predator is almost this kind of masculine figure of, I'm going to go hunt some animals and prove I'm a man. Raw.
To the point where he sees in Dutch a competitor worth competing with. Not someone that you can just kill willy-nilly, because what's the point? He's got some sort of macho respect where he has to throw down his weapons and start fighting hand to hand, which is so ridiculous.
Oh, I love that part.
It's so ridiculous. Again, if you had Jesse Ventura doing that, I would buy it. And even Schwarzenegger, you've got to buy it. But there's something so masturbatory about the whole thing. It's like, yes, I respect how masculine you are. Yes, I respect how masculine you are too.
See, Schwarzenegger is cartoony enough where there is some of that silliness, but I can still actually like him and root for him.
I wasn't rooting for either.
With Ventura, it would have been just like, yay, Predator, yay! I totally would have been with him.
Is this one of those cases where you absolutely were not rooting for the monster?
I like the monster. I was still rooting for Dutch when I watched this as a kid. I still like him, and I like the way that the movie kind of turns on this head of they have all this gear, they have all these sophisticated weapons, and midway through they kind of realize, well, he can see through our traps. We're going to have to go back to tree roots and branches and wood spears and things like that to actually defeat this monster.
Can I just root for the dirty possum that was in the jungle?
The Predator respect him enough not to kill him.
Exactly.
I like that idea of Predator friend to animals. He killed the scorpion. I will avenge that scorpion.
Yeah.
And they actually killed that scorpion, unfortunately.
Oh, that is a damn
It's
shame.
something weird about scorpions, because I remember the opening of Natural Born Killers, you see one get run over, and it looks like a real scorpion. I don't know why for a while it seemed like scorpions didn't count.
I have no idea, but the scorpion itself has similar features to our Predator when we finally do see his face. And the idea that this thing pretty much is deadly to larger, more intelligent things, I guess. And to kill the scorpion seemed like an affront to the Predator, to such a degree that he had to start hunting and killing these things that had killed the scorpion.
I shall avenge you by Krapthaw's hammer.
Exactly.
As for Schwarzenegger, he wasn't quite Mr. Amazing Superstar yet. He was coming off of action movies, but he hadn't gone into like comedies like Twins or Kindergarten Cop, so it feels like he's still sort of in the middle.
Well, at this point, had he done The Running Man? I think that
Running
was
Man
later.
was the same year.
It was
so,
the same
yeah.
year, and also
And again, Jesse Ventura.
Total Recall.
That was a couple years later.
Okay, so he's just starting the peak of his career.
Yeah. Like Twins would be 89, I think, and that's where he kind of crossed over into the mainstream because people who didn't see these violent movies could say, oh, there's Schwarzenegger and he's funny. And then Total Recall, and then by Terminator 2, everybody loved him. And you can see acting-wise, he's still kind of getting there. There's something really weird about Schwarzenegger when he swears. He always sounds to me like a little kid who's getting to swear for the first time.
Your assets, Dylan. Expendable assets. It comes with the job. I can accept it. Bullshit. You're just like the rest of us.
I said bullshit. I don't know why. Whenever he swears, it just sounds a little off in a weird way.
Can we talk about Schwarzenegger's beard in this movie for a minute?
Is she a beard?
So he absolutely did grow a beard for this movie. He did. I can see it. It's not a weave, basically.
Beard weave.
A beard. No, he has his version of a beard in this movie, and then some makeup artist has decided it's a good idea to start contouring in maybe some patchiness so that he's got a different color on the bottom of his face where the beard is.
It's an artistic 5 o'clock shadow.
It was distractingly bad. And it wasn't at any point in the movie where he had his camouflage makeup on. He was a washed face baby.
See, he needed Mac's little razor. They borrowed that and just...
It was distracting. I think I stopped and I'm like, what is that?
You can see a couple scenes. Schwarzenegger actually looks thinner because they were filming in Mexico and he got super sick at one point. There's supposedly one scene where he's filming with an IV just out of camera range. And after that, he stopped eating as much as possible to try to avoid getting sick. Everybody was getting sick when they made this movie because, filming in Mexico.
That's horrible.
It is.
No one should have to film a movie with an IV drip.
Not to mention that mud that he has to wear smelled really, really horribly the more he wore it, and it would dry up and leave the actor really cold in the jungle. They were shooting on like mountains and hills, and I mean, if you stand on a hill for too long, it gets really exhausting. Your ankles start to hurt like crazy.
Right. Well, you're at an angle.
The scenes where he's in the water, all that water was filled with leeches. I mean, there was all sorts of bad stuff going on the set.
It looked like a miserable shoot. I remember asking if any of this was soundstage because it was a prototypical jungle. It was beautiful. But the idea of working with that many variables, the possibility of rain, of like the most humid day possible in the jungle, and animals, bugs, things you can't control as a production designer or an actor or a director, that must have been just pure misery for most of the actors.
Not to mention the director, working with a mostly foreign crew, and there was supposedly a lot of corruption with the unions in Mexico at the time, so they would have 100 people on a set to do something that a couple people could do. They had to film in a couple places, Puerto Vallarta and Palenque, because the first location, there wasn't enough actual green foliage. You can see a lot of it is brown in some scenes, and they had to throw green foliage around the camera as much as possible.
There were a lot of scenes where there were very dry, dead leaves, which felt strange where they were.
And they had to tweak the color timing in a few scenes to bring out the green, and every once in a while the actors look a little peaked.
Strange. Yeah, they're looking a little sick.
And alongside Schwarzenegger, we have Carl Weathers as George Dillon. I can't look at Carl Weathers now without thinking about him getting a stew going from Arrested Development. All those years, Apollo Creed, Action Jackson, all that stuff flies out the window now.
It's all over.
I guess he was hired because McTiernan figured Schwarzenegger had to have a really good, solid professional actor to kind of help him up his game.
It didn't help. It didn't help at all. Carl Weathers was not given enough material to prop up the movie.
He has that one scene where he and Schwarzenegger are fighting once Schwarzenegger finds out the real nature of the mission that I think is pretty good.
Look, we just stopped a major invasion. In 3 days, they'd have been across the border with this stuff.
Why us?
Because nobody else could have pulled it off. You pissed about the cover story. I knew I couldn't get you in here without it.
So what story did you hand to Hopper?
Look, we've been looking for this place for months. My men were in that chopper when it got hit. Hopper's orders were to go in and get my men, and he disappeared.
He didn't disappear. He was skinned alive.
And my orders were to get somebody in who could crack these bastards.
Yeah, but one scene does not elevate a movie.
Well,
like
thankfully,
in this case.
Most of the time, Schwarzenegger just has to, kind of stand there stoically and spit out a line here and there. He doesn't have to do huge, heavy emoting for a lot of it unless he's, like, in pain, and you can do that part. He didn't get to do his noise, unfortunately, but...
Maybe he hadn't developed it by then.
Maybe. He refined that technique later, yeah.
Working in a mirror just to get that perfect...
With Dillon, though, I kind of feel like they go out of their way a little bit too much to make him the asshole.
Not just the asshole, but incompetent.
Yeah. Like, the idea that he used them to get this mission done, okay, it's shitty, but I could kind of see that in a really harsh, pragmatic way.
Agreed.
And the original script actually kind of fleshed him out to be a little bit more well-rounded. He's like, if they hadn't done this, these guys were going to take all the weapons the Russians were giving them and invade the other country that's right next door. So he's thinking, we're saving lives. We're doing what has to be done.
Right. But why did he have to go along?
I guess to make sure that the job was actually done and bring back all the intelligence and the papers and things. They wanted to show that Russia was funding them, I guess. I don't know. It seems like we're in the middle of a proxy war thing going on.
There's a throwaway line about Afghanistan between Poncho and Dutch. And during that time, it was the Soviet-Afghan war, and that was a proxy war.
Yeah.
The U.S. were funneling money in to prop up one side over the other. So the idea that we've got a movie that's involved in the proxy war, and of course in the Soviet-Afghan war, the CIA was heavily involved. So then we have a CIA agent in this movie trying to get intel on the Russians in the middle of this other country for another proxy war. It just kind of feels like a one-to-one.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, I didn't totally understand what was going on on. It was a little bit foggy in the dialogue. They clipped some things that would actually make it a little bit more clear.
I actually had the same issue.
I never noticed the shot where you see the guys going through these crates of weapons, and I kind of clicked, oh, okay, the Russians are bringing in these weapons, and Dutch has a line about, oh, heat seeker, getting more sophisticated for a bunch of mountain boys. So there's this clear idea that the Russians are actually supplying these guys.
It's very light on dialogue, but so much of it is murky.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of lines that are tough to hear at points.
Very lost. And it's not like there's any kind of background noise that would get lost in. It feels very, very muddled, just like they're speaking slightly underwater or something.
There's a couple scenes where the ADR kicks in mid-line.
And
I remember
it's miserable.
Richard Chavez has one of those where he's saying something and then the second half of his line suddenly drops into looping, and it's really strange.
There's something else, Major. This was no ordinary army taxi. It looks more like a surveillance bird to me.
It sounds really strange. It does become very clear.
Yeah.
We can understand that half of the sentence very well, but I don't know how much of this was on-site miking that was just went askew.
I'm assuming working in the jungle, they probably had a lot of issues with that.
Yeah.
I will say, if you have a really good stereo system, this movie is amazing sonically. All the jungle noises, and once the Predator is doing his weird thing with throwing voices and the noises that he makes, it's really, really cool. There's also the only female in the cast, Elpidia Carrillo as Ana Gonçalves. And I at least am happy they didn't make her a love interest for anybody.
I was concerned.
She is relatively smart. She's decently good at surviving, although the primary reason she survives is that she doesn't pick up a gun for most of the movie.
Right. But she is demonstrating strategy and intelligence and observation, which we find out do become weapons later on against the Predator. So she's demonstrating the kind of behaviors that one should adopt to survive against something like this.
We see she picks up all this info and conceals it. She conceals the blood. She actually conceals the fact she can speak English.
Yeah.
She knows a lot more about the Predator than anybody else does, even if it's mostly just myth and legend and stuff.
Only in the hottest years this happens. And this year it grows hot. We begin finding our men. We found them sometimes without their skin. And sometimes much, much worse. El que hace trofeos de los hombres means the demon who makes trophies of man.
And I'm very happy her character survives.
I am glad she survived. It does prove that this is the way to fight the Predator, is to not necessarily outsmart it, but to understand it. But I didn't really care either way at the same time if she lived or died. Her character didn't have much that made me root for her besides being in the wrong place at the wrong time, probably many, many times. I don't understand what she was doing at the guerrilla camp to begin with.
Well, I assume just working as a soldier like everybody else.
Right. So that makes it really difficult for me to just decide without reason that I'm rooting for her.
I like that eventually all the politics go out the window, that for Dutch and most of the rest of the team later, it doesn't matter that she's one of the guerrillas. Once he kind of cuts the little plastic bonds off her, it's like, we're all in this to survive. Who cares about any of that? Let's just get through this.
Which is honestly another symbol for proxy war, when you make deals with your enemies to fight against a common enemy.
One of the other things that makes me like her is there's a clear scene where when their big trap for the Predator fails and Poncho gets hit with that giant tree log, she has a perfect chance to run away from them and, not having a weapon, maybe survive, but she actually stops to help him get up and pull him along when they're trying to escape. And that's the thing that kind of pushes to me that idea that the politics are out now. Now comes my favorite performance in the movie, Kevin Peter Hall as the Predator, because, oh man, this guy was amazing.
By far the best performance in the movie.
He was 7'3", I mean, because they needed somebody who could tower over Schwarzenegger, even though we don't get a lot of chances to really see it. And he was one of the great creature suit actors of the 80s and 90s. He played the really silly-looking mutant bear from Prophecy, which I don't know if you've ever seen that one. It's ridiculous. He was an alien in Without Warning. He was one of the monsters from that Mazes and Monsters TV movie with Tom Hanks. And beyond his role in this, he's most well known as playing the Bigfoot from Harry and the Hendersons.
Of course.
And I think you can see there the range that as the Predator, he has these really graceful movements. When he's tapping on his little equipment gauntlet on his wrist, the little kind of delicate moves he does with it.
Well, he's great dexterity.
And later on when he's stalking Schwarzenegger, at the point where Schwarzenegger's really wounded, he just walks with this kind of casual swagger, like, I got all the time in the world. And then you compare that to Harry from Harry and the Hendersons, who he has this giant but really shy, awkward movement to him, constantly bumping into things and can barely fit into doorways, and he's just so sweet and lovable. It's amazing.
His physical performances are on par with Andy Serkis.
I'd agree. You can actually see him in a couple movies without makeup. He was the...
You can see him in this movie without
That's
makeup.
true. He's the helicopter pilot in the very last scene, the one who first sees the explosion. But he was the circus tall man in Big Top Pee-wee. And you ever see that? There was that Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Price, with the wormhole that everyone's taking bids on.
I have seen every single one of those episodes, so yes.
He's the tall ambassador that eventually gets pressured into dropping out of negotiations.
Yeah.
He actually has some dialogue there. Unfortunately, he contracted AIDS from a blood transfusion and died from AIDS-related pneumonia in 1991, and it's
What
a
a
real
loss.
shame. I know. Because not only was he just a great suit actor, everyone on this set and then on any movie he's been on said he was just the nicest guy, just an incredibly charming, gentle guy. So the fact that he can play these monsters and be really scary and intimidating really says a lot.
Yeah.
And the only part we see of him is his eyes, and yet those eyes say so much. In later Predator movies, the eyes were like puppeted, and the fact that you can actually see his eyes here really, really helps.
It's because we as humans connect to it. So it's a point of connection where we can see something we recognize in this alien.
But just to be able to emote with just that and the rest of your face is covered in pounds of foam latex and animatronics. He supposedly said working the suit was incredibly difficult. It was super heavy. He could barely see, especially with the helmet on, so he'd actually have to rehearse all of his scenes and basically perform them blind.
And they had special cooling equipment made for his costume. And can you imagine being in the jungle, which is hot? On a cold day in the jungle, it is hot. And then in a full foam suit where none of your skin is exposed to enough air to get any cooling. I mean, that's just miserable.
And he could only, even with the cooling suit, only be in the suit for a couple hours before he'd have to come out. He just couldn't do much. Scenes where he's, coming out of the water, that foam would just absorb the water like a sponge. Eventually, he'd just get so heavy, he'd probably fall over. And a couple scenes we see him kind of like leaping from rock to rock or leaping onto the trees and stuff. The suit was too heavy for him to do that. He had to be on bungee cords to be able to do it. But again, it still works. He actually looks like he can jump around and hop around after Schwarzenegger. Of course, Hall wasn't actually the first actor to play the Predator. It's pretty well known now that originally it was Jean-Claude Van Damme in this really silly looking suit that just didn't work.
You think it was silly?
The way that design is, that head really isn't good, and the way it bounces around in the test footage that survives, it's not great.
The bouncing in the test footage is terrible. I still like the shape of the head. I love the shape of the body. It's definitely a design that was not doable in 87. It's something that we could create now, not just with digital, but mechanically, practically as well. I think we could pull this off now. And I thought from some of the test footage that I saw, Van Damme was great inside the prototype.
I will give him that shot where we see him leap out from behind that log and land. It's a cool looking shot.
That athleticism was fantastic, but all reports are that he was miserable, and I don't think he would have been able to put that aside to act the character.
He really wanted to do it because he wanted to have a big showdown fight with Schwarzenegger, and I mean, nowadays
he would have had it.
Van Damme versus Schwarzenegger, that sounds amazing, yeah.
He would have had that showdown. It just would have been him in a suit.
And I don't think he could have done the martial arts that he would have wanted to do in that suit. It just looked too cumbersome.
The suit was cumbersome. It would have been too heavy, and the knees were bending backward. There was no way he would have been able to showcase anything.
Yeah, supposedly Schwarzenegger said he complained a lot in the brief time that he was on set. There's that great picture of him sitting next to Carl Weathers, and he just looks like, what the hell am I doing here? And even Carl Weathers is looking at him like, what is he doing here?
Was he fired?
They basically, after they shot the suit for a couple days, or actually I think it was one day, and they just went, no, this isn't working. We have to stop and redesign it. And in that break, he either left or was fired. He claims it was because they asked him to do a stunt that he thought was too dangerous in the suit, and they basically replaced him because he wouldn't do it. Other people say he left because he was just miserable, and they decided they needed somebody bigger to face off with Schwarzenegger, and so they got Hall. So it worked out for the best in the end, and I mean, certainly he had a great action career anyway, and got to work with Schwarzenegger down the road in Expendables 2 or 3 or whichever one it is. As for that original suit, though, while it wasn't used here, it did inspire one of the creatures from the sequel Predators that looks kind of similar. It doesn't quite have the head, but the armor plating it has is pretty similar. Now we're going to move on to somebody I like, and I got the strong sense watching the movie, you didn't, Bill Duke as Mac. I actually really like Bill Duke here. I think he's very creepy. The fact that other than a couple scenes where he's firing off the minigun, he's very quiet in his line readings, this weird, quiet, raspy...
No. It's not that he was quiet and raspy. It's that he was talking like this.
Past them trees, I see you.
I see you.
Starting to sound like the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That doesn't read as creepy to me. It's chewing the scenery.
I
kind of love it.
This is a chewing the scenery I like as opposed to Jesse the Body.
But I love them both equally. I think they both have a place in this movie. I almost wish I had gotten more of them, but that's because I would have pushed the tone of this movie slightly in a different direction.
Like if it was going to be that sort of performance from Duke as Dutch in the showdown, yeah, I could go for that.
That would have been great.
He'd actually work with Schwarzenegger on Commando. He usually plays a lot of cops and government guys. He'd work with Weathers again on Action Jackson a year after. He was in The Limey, Menace to Society, Payback. He played Bolivar Trask in X-Men The Last Stand before he somehow morphed into Peter Dinklage. And he was on the unfortunately worst episode of Battlestar Galactica, Black Market.
Oh, we don't talk about that episode.
He's also moved on to be a director, and he's actually pretty good. He did Rage in Harlem, Deep Cover with Lawrence Fishburne, Hoodlum, The Cemetery Club, and Sister Act 2. So he has range at least, but he's had an interesting, diverse career. And also, supposedly, the bit with the razor was his idea, and that's another thing I found very creepy.
I didn't find it creepy so much as I found it very unnerving, very, just the idea that you're sweating in the jungle, you're heavily sweating, and you're running a dry razor over and over the same places in your face. How does he not have the worst case of ingrown hairs and acne and scarring from this habitual razor use? It is really upsetting to me on a physical level.
Because he's just that tough.
His skin is so tough, he has to shave it all the time.
I do like that, considering he's the most vengeful of the group, that he's not the kind of yelling around, ranting, raving type.
Oh no, he's stealthy. He is the last word on stealth. Well, beyond the Predator, he's the last word of human stealth in this movie.
Yes, the guy who's running around screaming, "Go have some fun tonight." He is stealthy, but... But like that weird soliloquy he has looking at the moon, like...
Not a scratch, not a fucking scratch. You know whoever got you. Don't come back again, and when he does, I'm gonna cut your name right into. I'm gonna cut your name into.
So many other actors would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna cut your name to him." Oh, that it's just slowly this guy is falling apart under the strain of wanting to kill this creature. And the few times he gets to let it out, like when he's killing the boar, and it's just like out of control, and then he's yelling and ranting.
It's repressed rage, and he has this moment where he's allowed to let it out because he thinks he is doing battle with this thing that's been hunting them, only to find out it's a boar.
And when somebody makes a joke, he's like, "Shut the fuck up."
So you're fighting who you think is your enemy, only to find out that it wasn't the true enemy, which is, again, that happens a lot in war.
Let's talk about Sonny Lanham as Billy Soul. He started in adult films and had bit parts in The Warriors, Southern Comfort, and Poltergeist.
Did he come out and play?
Well, he was a cop, so no.
Oh, well, no, he did
the cop
not.
in the
There was
subway
no
scene.
playing.
He didn't play. And he was one of the pool workers in Poltergeist. And that got him attention. He was cast as Billy Bear, the bad guy, one of the bad guys from 48 Hours. He'd appear with Carl Weathers in Action Jackson. So we have two governors in this film, Schwarzenegger and Ventura. Lanham made a shot at it as well. He ran for governor of Kentucky, and then he later ran against Kentucky Senator and the current Republican Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, Mr. Bullfrog himself.
Oh, I guess we're going there.
Yeah. He ran as a libertarian, and he was going to try and get him out of his seat, which I would have liked. Except that Lanham made all these disparaging comments about Arabs and advocated their genocide, which led to the Libertarian Party going, nope, and rescinding his candidacy.
Yeah.
Though he's kind of quiet in the movie, apparently he was a real hellraiser to the point where the production hired a bodyguard for him, not to protect him, but to protect everyone else because he had a reputation for getting into fights with people.
Why hire someone like that?
I don't know. Maybe they just felt, he's got presence. Which I think is strange considering that's absolutely not the character he plays on screen.
Yeah.
Here's a character where it's unfortunate because, yes, Lanham is Cherokee and Seminole. And I'm glad they didn't go as far as they could have with the Native American stereotype.
They went far enough.
I mean, mostly, except for the little thing that's around his neck, they don't really bring it up too much. They kind of refer to him as he's got this creepy sense of being able to track, but that could also just be skill from being in the jungle.
I can't write it off as skill from being in the jungle because it could have been any of the other characters with that skill. But it wasn't. It was the Native American character who also happens to have like a type of mojo bag around his neck.
That's the bit I really could have done without.
I could have accepted one or the other. I still would have rolled my eyes a little bit, but both of them together makes it a deliberate choice. And it's funny because we spend most of the movie without doing too many stereotypically charged things. You know, we don't have African American characters who are doing stereotypical things. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we have two and they're just characters. So,
right.
Yeah.
So to have your next minority do two things that are heavily stereotypical, it was a little upsetting to see.
I do like, though, that he's kind of portrayed as this strong, silent type, and yet he's the guy we see is actually really scared. And it's like, once we see he's scared, we kind of realize, we should be scared too.
But that's it again. So he's strong and silent, which is stereotypical for so many different ethnicities. There's something about like, this quietness that is different from a white person. And then on top of it, he senses that there's something in the trees. He senses somehow that there's something out there. And this is just gross to me. I don't like his character, not because he's Native American. I don't like this character because this isn't a character. This is one ball of stereotype. Why isn't he just running around in a loincloth or, make it worse?
See, what kind of challenges it for me is the scene where they find Hopper and his crew, and Billy is the one who finds them, and his reaction is not what we normally see. He freaks out and jumps away, and he's like, ugh! He is really unnerved by this in a way that we don't expect to see from any of these guys.
Right.
And I found that a really interesting, humanizing moment. And the fact that later on we see that he is really scared of whatever this is.
Billy, you know something. What is it?
I'm scared, Pancho.
Bullshit. You ain't afraid of no man.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man. We're all gonna die.
I do wish they had kind of connected the point where he seems to go insane in the third act and decides he's going to face the Predator mano a mano. Maybe he thought he was going to do a Schwarzenegger, but...
I don't know. I couldn't tell if that was his descent into insanity or if that was a sacrifice or... I have no idea what that was. It was a convenient moment for the screenwriters to kill off a character.
And without us actually even seeing it, we just
right.
hear it. Interesting, though, he's actually not the only Native American actor in the film. Richard Chavez, who plays Pancho, is Native American as well, Cherokee. And yet, that's never really emphasized with him. He's just kind of this average guy. The only thing we see in that is that he can speak Spanish, because he has, I assume, Spanish descent as well. But I really like him.
So, he speaks Spanish. His nickname is Pancho.
And that's pretty much it, though. Otherwise, there's not really much in terms of a stereotype there. He's just kind of... I like him because he's not as kind of overtly macho as the others. He's kind of this cool, reserved, quiet guy, and I kind of like that about him. But one with a kind of a sense of humor. He still appreciates the humor in some of the situations with Anna kind of getting away from Dylan. He's the one who's cracking wise at Dylan and making fun of him.
So he is a very, very bland character. Very bland. I could not remember who he was for the whole movie. I'm like, that guy, the guy who vaguely looks French. And that's what I came up with to remember him. He vaguely looks French. Even though, honestly, He doesn't.
No.
But
I remember you kept attributing all of his lines to every other character.
that's the problem. And I found it interesting. I'm like, oh, he's going to die next. I have no idea who this guy is. He has no defining quality. He's going to die next. He is the last
one to
die. So, I mean, I guess we're subverting my own expectations of storytelling, because the first of the characters to die, the first 2 or 3 are ones with the most character.
I also think that Chavez is good at a lot of the reaction shots when they need something creepy going on and they kind of cut to him staring at it and quietly, inwardly flipping out. I really like that. Plus, I like the actor. I don't know if you ever watched the old War of the Worlds TV show that used to be on.
Yes.
He was Colonel Ironhorse in the first season of that before they abruptly killed him off for the second one. And I remember really liking him on there. So, unfortunately, I don't see as much of him anymore. He had to reduce his public profile when he had issues with a stalker in the late 1990s.
That's so upsetting.
He stopped doing conventions and you just don't see as much of him. But I really like him. Another interesting bit of casting is the guy playing Rick Hawkins, the kind of nerdy guy with the glasses who cracks the bad jokes. That's Shane Black, the screenwriter who wrote Lethal Weapon and is now a director. He also wrote Monster Squad, Last Boy Scout, Long Kiss Goodnight, and directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Iron Man 3, and The Nice Guys, and is now directing the new Predator movie, The Predator.
Every time I see him, I want to know why Harold Ramis is in this film. And it's the glasses, he's got the coloration, but it's unnerving. It's a little weird. I keep thinking that a ghost is going to show up and get some ectoplasm.
See, those proton packs, they probably would have been handy against the Predator. That wouldn't have been bad.
But getting back to the actual character, Hawkins, he's obnoxious.
He really is.
He's very obnoxious. He tells the worst jokes, and they're not offensive per se. I'm not offended by the word pussy. Obviously, I'm saying it on a podcast right now.
Billy! The other day, I was going down to my girlfriend. I said to her, "Jeez, you got a big pussy. Jeez, you got a big pussy." She said, "Why did you say that twice?" And I said, "I didn't." See, it's because of the echo.
But they're bad jokes, and they're not the kind of bad jokes that I love. I love puns. I love bad jokes.
Oh, wait till we get to the Roger Moore Bond movie.
I'm not looking forward to any James Bond pre-2000, but it's just absurd.
It almost feels like, for me, overcompensation, that he is the least manly of this group of soldiers, and it's like he's trying to compensate by throwing around these kind of guy jokes, like, "Ha, isn't that funny?" And
why is he there?
Well, I think he's like the radio operator. Assume he's pretty skilled and can handle himself in a crisis enough that Dutch trusts him. But I do like, he has this weird moment when Anna breaks away from Poncho and he has to chase after her right before he's killed. When he grabs her and he's just like, "Please, please." It's almost like underneath this bluster, he's this guy who sometimes doesn't know what to do. And he's in this moment just like, "Please, come on, give me a break. I don't know. I need to take you back."
And if he's a radio operator, he isn't really supposed to be where he is, if that makes sense. That he wouldn't be the person in the heat of it.
Well, I assume in this kind of team, even the radio operator has to be trained in battle. So.
Well, it doesn't mean he has to be incredible at it, which he doesn't seem to be.
Well, we do notice that when the battle starts, he's holding back with Dylan on the ridge. He's not the guy who runs right out. I mean, he gets in there eventually, but he's not part of the front line.
So it is great to see a character who is not at all equipped to handle anything that's going on.
And of course, he's the first one to get it.
He is.
This actually isn't his only acting role. He appeared as a cop in Night of the Creeps and Dead Heat. He was a Navy crewman in The Hunt for Red October and had a bit part in RoboCop 3. So he's got a little bit of acting. I guess Joel Silver really liked his Lethal Weapon script and invited him to act in the movie so he could see directing on the set because he wanted to direct eventually.
You get killed first, so you don't have to do too much. Get some experience, kid.
We are going to suspend you upside down with, your clothes off with blood hanging from you. So be ready for that.
Now you know what actors go through.
Only a couple more to note. R.G. Armstrong playing the General, Homer Phillips. He's best known as a Western actor. He was in a lot of Western TV shows like Gunsmoke, Wanted Dead or Alive. He was in that Twilight Zone episode, Nothing in the Dark, with the old woman in the house trying to fend off Mr. Death.
He is notable as the only old white guy in the movie.
He's barely white. They put so much tan makeup on him to make him look like he's not as old as he is, because even the director acknowledged he'd be way too old to be in service like this. I always remember him as Prune Face from Dick Tracy. which...
Oh, I didn't know that was him.
Yeah, if you listen to the voice. And he was in... Do you remember that movie, The Car, with the satanic car chasing James Brolin in the desert?
No, but now I want to see it.
The last person to note is the voice of the Predator, Peter Cullen, the voice actor best known as Optimus Prime from Transformers, as well as Eeyore in the Winnie the Pooh cartoon, Kara and Knight Rider, Venture in Dungeons and Dragons. And he did voice work for the 1976 King Kong, where he did some of the ape noises, and Captain Flint from Treasure Planet.
I was so impressed. I loved the sounds he was making, and I feel like those sounds have become iconic because I hear them in other films. I heard it in Babadook. We've heard it in Audition. It's just like a very deep throat kind of clicking noise.
Which he apparently got from a horseshoe crab. If you turn a horseshoe crab over, the sound it makes, that anguish kind of noise, and he decided it would be perfect for this creature. Supposedly it did a number on his throat when he was making the
understandably.
voice for it. And I assume that last, what the hell are you line that he does.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely added to the character with those.
But talking about the character of the Predator himself right now, and the idea that he mimics and he learns... because we're not given enough information in this movie, I'm going to assume that he has been abandoned on this planet somehow.
See, I always took it as more, this is like his weekend outing or something. That when that ship flies up, it's like dropping him off like, all right, see you Tuesday, have fun.
I kind of think of it as maybe a punishment. Now you're stranded on this planet.
It's funny because the predators as a species in other movies and other media, the comic books, they've always been defined by just the hunting. And I kept thinking, what if this is just like his day off? This is like the corporate outing for predators.
Or this is, he's going hunting and going to bring back a couple humans.
Next week he'll be back in his cubicle in the office, just like, hey, Ray, look, I got a special forces team. Did pretty good. Look at the picture. Look at this one. This one's going over the mantle.
That's kind of awful.
Because he's kind of like an interstellar Ted Nugent. He's kind of an asshole.
So he mimics. He has technology that bends light around him so he's invisible. But then he starts to learn to do things like speak English. And he learns what laughing is. And he understands that it's not just a sound that humans make. He understands the context of laughter. And that's our big moment where you realize the Predator's more than just an intelligent animal of sorts. This is a creature capable of rational thought, planning, building, and the ability to learn and understand other languages, alien languages, quicker than human ever could.
I like the fact that when he seems to parrot back Dutch's line, he asks, what the hell are you? And the Predator says the same thing.
What the hell are you?
You realize, now he might just be meaning, oh my God, how did you beat me? How did you, this puny thing, beat me? What are you?
Or even the understanding of, who are you to ask me what I am? What are you?
There's also something very Klingon about the Predator, especially in that, well, if I'm going to die, I'm taking you with me kind of thing. That weird honor system. The fact it won't kill Anna as long as she doesn't have a gun.
It seemed a little bit like once the Predator realized that Schwarzenegger wasn't just going to stop and kill him, there was a possibility he might be taken alive, and that's not okay.
Yeah. So the movie was directed by John McTiernan, and he's kind of become this name in action movies with this. Hunt for Red October, of course, Die Hard is being the big one. Medicine Man, 13th Warrior, the Thomas Crown Affair remake, which again shows his range that he can do a fun kind of caper movie like that. But this was actually his first. Before this, he had done this weird little suspense movie, Nomads, that managed to do a lot of great atmosphere in a low budget and feature Pierce Brosnan with the worst French accent I've ever heard on screen. Unfortunately, his career was kind of derailed after he was involved in that whole Anthony Pellicano wiretapping case, where he was alleged to have hired that private investigator to tap the phones of his ex-wife and producer Charles Roven, who he was having a fight with on Rollerball. And after he went to prison, we just haven't seen very much of him, which is a pity. He's a really good director.
It's really interesting what Hollywood will forgive.
I know. It probably didn't help that his last few movies before that were Rollerball and Basic, neither of which made much money. I think if they had been big hits, it would have been like, as soon as you're out, we'll give you another one. But you never know. Maybe he'll get another job again. We mentioned that the action scene in the gorilla compound isn't good. All the rest of the action, I think, is really well done, though.
The action is shot well. And this is not a point-and-shoot movie. You have to move with the action, even though there's not much variation in the surroundings. As much as the jungle is a character, it's a non-character in that you wouldn't know one area of the jungle to the next. And to be able to shoot consistently under those conditions, that is spectacular.
He supposedly even broke his wrist while they were filming after he fell out of a tree, but didn't find out until he got back to the U.S. that that's what happened.
I can understand that. When I was a child, I broke my wrist, and it hurt. My wrist hurt a lot, and I think it was a week or so before I ended up getting an x-ray.
Oof.
So it can happen. I can believe it. But that's commitment.
Even more than the action, though, I realize so much of this movie is more suspense. With the predator stalking them, it's these ways he shows us where the creature is in the frame. The scene where Dutch is running around that cave and we just see the glowing green blood start dripping behind him and realize it's right over him and he has to figure out how to get out of its path. Things like that. A lot of really good setup and payoff. The movie was written by Jim and John Thomas. They also wrote The Rescue, Predator 2, Executive Decision, Wild Wild West, for which they shared a Razzie Award, Mission to Mars, Behind Enemy Lines, and Hard Time on Planet Earth. So this is pretty much the thing they're best known for. The script was originally titled Hunter and was inspired after the success of Rocky IV. The joke around Hollywood was, who are they going to get Rocky to fight next? Well, it'd probably have to be an alien. So if you just take Rocky out of that and switch Rambo out, you can see how the script would evolve from there.
I'm not terribly impressed with the script itself.
No?
I enjoy the movie. It was good. It's not something I'm really ever going to seek out to see again, but if it was on USA, I'd probably watch it, which is great for a certain type of film. But the dialogue is such crap for the most part in this movie that it needed a treatment. It really needed a treatment.
It kind of ranges between functional and crazy macho posturing. That's kind of like the only two speeds it has for the most part.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite one-liner from the movie?
Yes. I don't have the full line, but the phrase is a broke dick dog. A broke dick. And that's just terrible. Like, you don't want to think about that. And plus, you have the alliteration and the sound B's and D's and K's, and it's almost poetic.
Oh, I'm trying to think of which one I like. It's probably something Max says, but I'm not sure which one. One of his deliveries I find kind of ridiculous. The one he says to Dylan about, you ghosts again, I'll bleed you real quiet like, leave you here. Just
that was my favorite of his lines.
And just Carl Weathers' reaction like, okay.
Because Carl Weathers, his character, Dylan, has been behind a CIA desk getting soft, which they keep telling us this because he keeps screwing up in the jungle. And then to get threatened by this guy who is just scary. He's intimidating. He says creepy things and whispers. That moment is just so good.
Oh, there's one other one. I also notice Dylan is kind of made to be the asshole who doesn't believe that, doesn't believe it's a creature, doesn't believe anything's going to work when they're trying to make a trap. It's like, oh yeah, like this is going to work. I do love, though, that moment when the trap doesn't seem to work and they're just sitting there waiting and he's like, what are you going to try next? Cheese?
That was funny.
It's a silly line, but I do love it.
But what does end up undoing the predator is one of those mouse traps.
Yeah.
Literally one of those mouse traps.
And Schwarzenegger is the cheese.
Oh my God, he is the cheese.
I did take a peek at the original script, and it's a little bit different. And in some important ways, the end fight was actually going to take place with Dutch wounding the Predator and it running off. And he runs through the Predator's camp where he finds the skins of a lot of his compatriots just strung up. And the Predator's getting into its ship. Dutch grabs the Predator's gun that had dropped and shoots him in the ship and kills him, and the ship blows up. And I'm glad they didn't use that. I feel like the Predator running away, it just doesn't seem to fit the character of him.
The Predator running away does not fit the character of the Predator. If it were couched in the Predator luring him to a better area for fighting, I'd believe that. I almost wish they had gone to the Predator's camp and that we had seen a bit more of the the results of running into the Predator. I know intellectually all those characters are gone, and we kind of get an idea of what the Predator does after he gets them. but there would be something very important visually to see that, oh, well, we're just prey. We're just deer. We are the boar out here. This isn't personal.
Yeah, I guess McTiernan felt it would be in bad taste to show that stuff at that point.
It's gruesome.
It is pretty gruesome.
I'm not sure it would have played with an audience then. It would definitely play with an audience now.
I think the scene of him taking Billy's spinal cord and brain out and treating his skull, and then that one shot where he's looking over his previous kills, it gets the idea across enough.
It does. I think one could have been supplanted with the other. If we'd taken away that scene, gotten the full result of what happens.
Although I do kind of like the juxtaposition that while Dutch is actually preparing for battle, the Predator is just kind of resting on his laurels looking at what he's already done.
I do. I like that we're not just seeing him admire his own handiwork, but that he's continuing on with what he does post-fight. Dutch is getting ready to fight, and he is finishing up his fight. He's skinning his kill. Plus, we need to touch on the Predator's downfall, as it were.
Cue the Looney Tunes cartoon thing.
A tree trunk-like thing smashing on top of his head. It was so Wile E. Coyote. I almost waited for him to lift up a little sign saying, "Yikes."
Especially because this guy has been dodging bullets and is almost untouchable, and he just kind of stares up at, uh-oh.
And the music cue for that moment was so comedic.
I was really confused when I was a kid. I thought it was supposed to be that the log was going to fall onto the spike things and drive them into him.
See, that's what I thought too, and that may have been the original plan.
Well, no, the original plan was if you watch when he springs the trap, a rope comes up. That log was just the counterweight, and the rope was supposed to bring the Predator up into the spikes.
I see.
And they composited this really goofy-looking animated rope in that shot, so you kind of got the idea, but it didn't quite work at the time. It took a while for me to figure out what he was actually supposed to be doing. It's just dumb luck that the Predator stands right where the thing is.
But he also, that's a really complex mousetrap that is probably not going to work.
And only works if you're coming at it from one particular angle.
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about the cinematography by Donald McAlpine. He shot a bunch of movies for Bruce Beresford, such as Breaker Morant and The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie, as well as Patriot Games, The Edge, and Moulin Rouge. Apparently, McTiernan kind of considered him a mentor. And I was noticing during the movie how many shots are low, pointed up at the actors.
Yes.
Which normally would make an actor look kind of intimidating, but here it kind of frames them against the jungle. And later on, when you realize that the trees are what the Predator is using to get around, it's kind of this interesting hint of where they should be looking, but actually aren't.
And the jungle is a character.
Yeah.
So the idea that the human actors are dwarfed a little bit by the jungle just shows you how important the jungle is.
And I like how he frames it with the jungle coming in between the actors. There's a lot of shots where you'll have a character in the foreground, a couple of trees or bushes, and then a character in the background, and another one behind. One right after they hit the guerrilla camp where there's this long sweeping shot follows one character. He moves, passes another one, and then we follow that character, and then another one, and we follow that character. Really nice, efficient way to show these guys moving through the jungle. And also, I got to talk about the film stock. There's a really odd, grainy kind of quality to the movie.
But not all of the movie. When all of the characters leave the helicopter and the helicopter takes off again, that shot of the helicopter taking off again is so grainy that it felt like they were trying to style it after live war reels.
I noticed that in a couple of the shots where they're descending too.
Yeah, and then it's smoothed out a bit after that. So I'm not sure how much of that was film stock or how much of that was transfer.
I do notice there are a couple shots, like when Mac first picks up the minigun and is firing into the trees, that are actually very slightly out of focus. And a couple shots when characters are talking too. So it might have been with the locale. They just had to kind of take what they could get in some of those instances.
Right.
Let's talk about the special effects. I think the cloaking effect still looks really good after all this time.
It looks good. It doesn't look really good because obviously we have more advanced stuff to compare it to. Given the time, it looks fantastic.
The only shots where it doesn't totally work are some of the ones where the Predator is leaping from a branch and you can tell the actor is moving in a little bit too much slow motion.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I really like the strange look it has. Apparently, they'd shoot the actor in this red suit in the jungle because it would contrast against the green. And then they'd shoot it again without the actor, but with a 30% wider lens. So that would fill in the area of the red suit, but just look a little distorted. And then they were assembled in this computerized motion control camera that created these smaller concentric outlines of the character that gave it that sort of ringed look that it has. But it's really effective, especially because you see it moving in a lot of shots where the camera is moving. That one where it's circling around Dylan and it's running behind some trees, it still looks really good. Or the one where it's standing still and you can just kind of make out the outline as the character is looking around the horizon, little bits like that. Apparently they tried to shoot some of those with a monkey in a red suit, thinking the monkey would have all these cool kind of maneuverings around the jungle.
Monkey was too fast.
The monkey was too embarrassed. It was in the red suit, it would suddenly hide behind a tree and not show itself. So they'd get 1 second of a monkey in a red suit just going, and that was it. It was not happy with that job. The thermal vision shots are not actual thermal vision shots. They actually tried to do a real thermal camera, which is bulky and just very awkward. But you bring it out to a jungle where it's like 90 to 100 degrees.
Everything reads
as red, yeah.
My problem with the use of the thermal vision, and I did love the idea, but my problem with it is that it was very inconsistent with what they decided would be the hottest. So sometimes it would be like somebody's elbow, somebody's earlobe.
Part of me tries to write that off as, all right, well, maybe this guy's elbow is right in the path of the sun or something, and that's heating the skin a little bit more. I don't know. Or the fact that it's alien technology. Maybe it's not quite reading thermal the way we know it, but some other form of radiation. I don't know.
I can forgive it. It's definitely nitpicking. But I would have wanted them to pay a little more attention to where the thermal hotspots would have been.
Yeah, I think RoboCop in the few scenes where he uses his thermal vision did a better job of it. But also, they didn't have to use it in the middle of a jungle. So
that's true.
We'll give them a little bit of room. And I will say, any of the scenes where you see a close-up of one of the actors and just see the skull shape, the spot where the nose would be, the sockets of the eyes, it is really unsettling.
It is. I was actually wondering how they did that.
Well,
but that's specific.
Supposedly, they... like I said, they couldn't get it to work. They actually tried to ice the jungle to get that to work, and that didn't. So they went to this post-production house, and they just manipulated the negative to get that effect. I'm guessing it was just sort of animated on. I don't know.
It looks wonderful. It
looks really good.
That's the only time I'm truly satisfied with the thermal vision.
A couple other weird little effects. When Arnold is in the helicopter in the first scene and he has his cigar, they couldn't get the cigar to light properly on camera, so they actually had to animate in the little glow on the tip of it.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Well, it looks perfect. You'd never know otherwise.
It looks great.
Also, they were meant to have the whole helicopter trip into the jungle with the doors open, but they tried shooting it with blue screen and it just didn't look very good. So they decided to just have it closed and have a red light on there instead, which I think was definitely the better way to go.
Yeah.
Also, I kept thinking the music that they play, that, having some fun tonight, I started to wonder if that was like a pre-game ritual for these guys.
It seemed like it. Nobody had a problem with this music being on. And yes, they're in a helicopter and it's very loud. But the way they interacted with each other, they definitely had a pre-game ritual.
Yeah, it had a very sports team kind of in the locker room joking around kind of quality.
A lot of the things they were saying to each other felt really rehearsed, almost like these are things they've been saying to each other for years.
Yeah, because it would seem strange for these guys who have been together for years to be having some of these jokes and jibes
Character moments, yeah. Which is something that we needed to talk about, actually. In screenwriting with characters, you're supposed to really decide what a character's totem is. And by totem, I mean the item that they go to the most, the item that represents them or that they are the most connected to. Most of the characters in this film definitely have totems. So Dutch is his cigar. Yes, we only see him with the cigar in that one scene, but that is absolutely his totem.
I would argue that's Schwarzenegger's totem at this point.
It is definitely Schwarzenegger's totem at this point, but it's Dutch's totem. When we think of him, come on, you think of him with the gun, but you also think of him with the scar.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though it's that one scene.
Now I have an image of Dutch kind of finding a quiet place in the jungle and spinning atop like, am I dreaming? I need to wake up.
Dylan, of course, has his lighter because that's his point of connection with Dutch. They both have these lighters. Blaine has two, I guess. He's got the chewing tobacco, which everybody teases him for, but he also has that ridiculous hat. Absurd hat. Poncho, I couldn't figure it out. He felt like he didn't have a totem to me, and that may have been one of the reasons I found his character so bland.
Maybe. The closest is that grenade gun that he carries, but otherwise, yeah, he doesn't really have much like that.
Yeah. Hawkins, of course, those giant glasses and that comic book.
He almost had another one. The character is supposed to have this giant red beret, but
That would have been too much.
Shane Black didn't want it. He thought it was stupid. And now he actually wishes he had it because he thought it would have made the character more distinctive. I'm glad they nixed it.
It's distinctive enough.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Mac has both the flask and the razor. I personally feel like the razor is his totem, but the flask is something that's a point of connection with another character. Billy, of course, has his neck pouch, mojo bag. So all of these characters have these totems that are character moments, and I would say most of these totems are invoked in the first scene we see them together in the helicopter. We are getting to know them when they go around holding or touching or interacting with their totems and each other's. They are not holding or touching each other, just to be clear.
I just had an image being of Schwarzenegger being caressed by Jesse the Body Ventura.
Stop it.
Holding him tight on those cold jungle nights. Well, he is the sexual Tyrannosaurus. So.
Oh my goodness. So that these characters all have such a stereotypical screenwriting trope, the totem, but to the degree that we can see what it is, that we can tell what it is, and it's in our face.
That almost feels like something that goes back to old war movies where somebody has the picture of his sweetheart and somebody has the lucky dice or whatever. Something weird.
When you see those totems in this type of film, you know it's going to come up again when that person is dead. Someone is going to have the flask, or we're going to see the neck pouch, and by that totem, we know this person is gone. And sometimes when you're writing a character, one of the first things you do is figure out what is the item this character comes back to all the time. At just about every movie, you will find the object the character interacts with, and by that, we have a relationship.
And something at least to tell them apart from other characters, except apparently for Poncho. Poor
Poncho. Nobody loves Poncho.
Only a couple more things do you have to discuss. First of all, of course, the great Stan Winston, who actually designed the final Predator we see in the movie. Oh, I miss this guy. He made
gorgeous design.
So many incredible creatures. Edward Scissorhands, the Monster Squad animals. His Gillman from that is still incredible. The Terminator, Aliens, Pumpkinhead. And to be brought in the last minute, basically, and create something this iconic that, now everybody knows the look of the Predator.
I do almost feel like because he was brought in last moment and because this character is so well defined, this might have been something he wanted to do for a while, something like this. So he may have already had the seed.
He actually was very upfront about the fact where a lot of the design came from was not from him. There was a pre-production sketch by an artist named Alan Monroe while they were still trying to figure out what the Predator would look like. That's pretty close in terms of the helmet and the physique and some of the armor and weaponry and stuff. He really was the one he had to come up with what was under the mask, and he claimed that a lot of that came from he was on a flight with James Cameron to promote Aliens, and Cameron was like, I've never seen a creature with mandibles. Make something with mandibles. And so the Predator's distinctive toothy mandible face came from a suggestion from Cameron.
Which is terrifying. How many movies have we seen since that have had creatures with mandibles just opening up wider and wider, and they just keep opening?
It's like this really unpleasant mix of reptilian and insect.
Yeah.
And they have these two things that don't feel like they should go together, but it looks so good. That moment when the helmet comes up and the jaws just kind of spread out and he gives that roar.
The best monster creatures are combinations of animals we recognize.
Yeah, it gives us some kind of hold on it, something we can kind of relate to with it. We all can relate to, insect jaws doing their little twitchy thing is really, really creepy. For some people, reptiles are really creepy, so throw them together. And then things like his weird little quills that look like dreadlocks. I love that little touch. When he whips around and they kind of whip after him, it's really cool looking. Gives him such a distinctive silhouette. And as for the Predator's blood, it's actually just that same fluid from glow sticks.
Oh, it is.
Same thing. They enhance it slightly optically. You can tell they add a little bit more of a shine to it, but it was supposed to be orange in the original script, but they felt green would look better on the plants.
It does. It also connects him to the jungle because in his inside, he is green too.
The only thing I can think of is Herbert West, running around collecting it all so he can inject it into things and bring them back to life. Maybe if they stuck it in Blaine.
Maybe that's how it happened.
Yeah, if they stuck it in Blaine, maybe Blaine would have got back up. You never know. Lastly, we have to talk about the music score by Alan Silvestri.
I was surprised that it was a Silvestri score because there's so much percussion. There's something almost synthetic in a way. And when I think of Silvestri's music, it's always horns and strings. It's orchestral.
Once it gets going, like in a lot of the suspense scenes, I still hear a lot of the old Silvestri horn section stuff. Like the piece that he called his fanfare for the common mercenary whenever somebody is mourning, like when Mac is talking about Blaine or when we see Dutch at the end. There's a lot of military pomp kind of mixed into the movie with his normal stuff. But as you said, a lot of percussion, that recurring drum beat that we just hear.
Which I love.
Yeah, oftentimes with just a shot of the jungle, it's just really creepy. And a lot of clicking noises that sound similar to the Predator's vocalizations, especially in that opening theme, that kind of thing. It's like all these kind of swirled and mixed together. And I adore his theme for when Dutch is preparing his traps at the end, that sort of big preparation, slow building theme. Oh, whenever I'm doing something like, putting together the microphones for recording or doing something at work, I kind of hear that in the back of my head. Little bits of trivia on the production. The actors all trained in a modified boot camp under a military advisor, so they could kind of do that hand signal thing whenever we see him in the jungle, like, you go there, and make it look kind of realistic. Dutch's infamous stick around moment was mostly put in there as a way to get rid of the big unwieldy machete that was made for the character that was just too heavy for Schwarzenegger to carry around.
Stick around?
Yeah, when he threw the machete in the guy and he sticks into the pole.
Oh. Terrible.
That still makes me laugh, I'm sorry to say.
Roll my eyes at that one. I roll my eyes at that one.
The Predator's medical tools were actually veterinary equipment, which is interesting. They look kind of strange and bizarre, but they still do kind of look Earth-based, especially because in his little weird gun thing, I could see a spring. It's funny, one of the totems you were mentioning, the Sergeant Rock comic book that Shane Black has seen reading here and there, actually came about because Schwarzenegger had a bunch of them on the set because he had been considering playing the character in a movie adaptation. He had them for research. Mm-hmm. But it fits the character and
does.
The setting perfectly. They never specify what country this is supposed to be taking place in, but the novelization identifies it as Valverde, the fictional country made up for Commando that Steven DeSouza kept using in some of his movies. It's in Die Hard 2 and his TV show Super Carrier as well.
But we're also establishing this fictional place as a Spanish-speaking Central American.
It is Central American,
right.
Somewhere in there, yeah. Supposedly next to Guatemala. And this is a little bit of interesting trivia for the crew. One of the effects artists on the movie was Joel Hynek. His dad is J. Allen Hynek, the famous UFO scientist, who actually appears in Close Encounters as one of the heads of the government program in that. Let's talk about the legacy of the movie. Of course, it was followed by Predator 2, directed by Stephen Hopkins, which had the Predator hunting in slightly futuristic Los Angeles against Danny Glover. And oh boy, I wanted to love this movie as a kid. I was so psyched when it came out, and it's really disappointing. Other than Bill Paxton being pretty good in it, and a really manic and insane Gary Busey, it's not that great. Oh, and they bring Kevin Peter Hall back, which is kind of nice. He's still great as the Predator. Of course, there was the comic book series from Dark Horse pitting the Predator against the Alien that led to 2 Alien vs. Predator movies of varying quality.
I suggest a Sunday, late morning, early afternoon double feature of Alien vs. Predator and Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, that I'm down for.
Yes. I think it just kind of encapsulates what those movies are like. I'm not sure if you had these films. Sundays were movies that were of no value.
The stuff
really.
You'd find on cable and go like, oh, it's on. I'll watch this.
Yes.
Yeah.
This movie's on TNT. This movie's on USA. Oh, I guess they're showing this movie for a month kind of movies. And you'd watch them on Sundays. I have very vivid memories of these Sunday movies.
I still actually kind of like Alien vs. Predator, the first one. I mean, taken as what it is, that it is one of those dumb Sunday movies, it's kind of fun.
It is so much fun, but so is Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, no, I agree. Alien vs. Predator Requiem, the second one, oh, boy, that's a disappointment.
Oh, I just don't think you should watch that.
See, and the problem is, I love the first half of it where it seems like our hero is going to be this kind of Winston Wolfe type predator who's just there to clean up the mess. Once they start bringing in the human characters, I tune right out. Another follow-up, directed by Nimrod Antal and produced by Robert Rodriguez, Predators, came out years later, and boy, that's the Predator sequel I wanted. That movie is so much fun. With Adrian Brody and Alice Braga against a trio of Predators. Great cast in that one. And
could you imagine Adrian Brody of The Pianist in a Predator movie?
And he's kind of in the Arnold role. He's got a lot of the quality that Richard Chavez has as Poncho, this kind of lean, quiet, slightly stoic badass.
Right.
But he's pretty good. And it's got Lawrence Fishburne. Mahershala Ali is in it before he was a really big name. Topher Grace, Danny Trejo, A lot of good people.
That's an incredible cast. Did the script live up to it?
I'd pitch it at a slightly higher level than this one.
Oh.
The individual characters, it has that sort of Con Air quality of let's get all these really diverse and bizarre, weird killer types together and throw them against predators.
And of course, we're getting another Predator movie.
And we are. Not too many details about it thus far, but I can't wait. One of the other interesting developments that Predator gave us, the movie was immortalized when a genus of goblin spider was named after the movie. Specifically, let me see if I can say this right.
You're going to massacre some Latin names right now.
Predator unops. The name was applied by a team of Brazilian scientists because the spider's facial appearance was similar to the predator's mandible visage. The genus includes 2 species groups, Group Schwarzenegger and Group Peter Hawley, and includes many species with names derived from characters, actors, or filmmakers involved in the Predator franchise. So we have Predator Runops Billy, Predator Runops Blaine, Dylan, Dutch, Valverde, McTiernani, and Yautja, which is...
Yautja?
That's the name that they gave to the Predator species in the comic books.
Yautja?
Yep. Yautja. Okay, what's your favorite scene from the movie?
I'm conflicted. The helicopter scene in the beginning, introducing all of the characters, is my natural choice. It's a wonderful scene. We get to see them get ready for this big fight that's coming. But then we reach the end of the movie, and the credit sequence gives us the name of each actor over a full-on face shot of the character, giving like a thumbs up or a smile or something just ridiculous. And that might be my favorite scene in the movie. There's this very specific era of the 80s where, and I think Police Academy did this, where at the end of the film you get to see the character saying hi to the camera. It's a third wall breaking moment that you don't get in a movie like this that's usually reserved for comedy.
You'd almost expect instead they do the kind of face projected on the sky, like in memoriam of all these guys who died. Not like, hey, I'm going to die later. Yeah.
Yes, with rest in peace.
I can think of I remember FX in the 80s, that movie did that. I remember Con Air did that at the end.
Yeah.
And it's always weird when it's a violent movie where all these characters are dead later.
Right. And even with Con Air, I think there's a certain amount of comedy in that film, enough to accept an end credit sequence like this. But in Predator, it feels weird, even though it is a stylized action, horror, sci-fi. It's a lot of genres, but it's not comedy. But they put on, they tack on this comedy ending that's just kind of like, and that's what these boys have been up to.
You know who's missing? We don't get a shot of the Predator just being like, hey, right back at you.
I know. That would have made it.
Him with shades on going, hey.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's the big finale when the Predator reveals his face, but especially that moment right before when he picks up Dutch and is looking at his skull and just looking like, that'll look good on the mantelpiece. Yeah, I like that one. Because I can just imagine Dutch has been like, what is he doing?
It's interesting that you read that scene that way, because I read it as, how is this one different from the other ones that I killed so easily?
I looked at it as, I really like this one. I'm going to make this kill particularly good. Because that's the moment he starts taking everything off. No, I'm not just going to just gut him. I'm going to make this one worth it because this is a mighty skull. Maybe the Predator is a secret phrenologist or something. He's just like, look at that scalp.
Maybe.
And just that moment where he pulls everything off and the big reveal of the face, because it's such an incredible moment. All right, what are your recommendations? What do you think people might like if they enjoy this one?
If you're a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger films, you need to see Total Recall. I've recommended it before. I will recommend it again. It is the most Arnold Schwarzeneggeriest film there is.
I think that's a new adjective.
It is. I will use it from now on. It's awkward, but I'll use it. And with alien films, with aliens crashing on Earth, wreaking havoc, I still have to say The Thing.
Mm-hmm. A lot of when they're in the jungle and being picked off, I kept thinking of The Thing, too.
Yeah.
In terms of, that movie's a lot better of establishing this weird group of characters and how they kind of bounce off each other. But there's definitely a touch of that in here. For me, I'd recommend a weird little movie called Dog Soldiers. It was the first movie directed by Neil Marshall, who did The Descent And later on, we do a whole bunch of great Game of Thrones episodes about this group of British soldiers who are on training maneuvers who suddenly run into a pack of werewolves.
Interesting.
It's super low budget, but it has some really good makeup effects. Has Kevin McKidd from Trainspotting, Sean Pertwee. A lot of fun. And the other one I'd recommend is one we talked about in our King Kong episode, the 1932 adaptation of The Most Dangerous Game, based on the Richard Connell short story, where again you have, in that case, Joel McCrea and Fay Wray being hunted in the jungle by this crazed villain. And a lot of the scenes of McCrea setting up these traps, trying to keep himself alive and just hoping that the bad guy is going to wander into them, are right in there. I mean, he practically has a, kill me, I'm here moment in that film too.
It just occurs to me that you were trying to walk me into a trap earlier when you asked me what my favorite phrase was.
Well, all right, I put it 50-50 between that and get to the chopper.
Because I do walk around saying, do it now.
She does. A lot. And it's funny.
Way too often for someone who has never seen the movie all the way through until tonight.
I like watching the reaction of people who probably don't know where the quote comes from. Just like, why is she talking
because
that way?
I say it exactly like, do it now.
And you don't even put in the kill me, I'm here part.
Well, I don't want to die.
Yeah, that might look a little stranger in public. That's one thing about seeing this at the marathon with the whole crowd. When it got to the get to the chopper line, everyone said it in unison. It was kind of amazing. All right, that ends our discussion, but not the conversation. If you'd like to have your say about Predator or feel like we missed something, check out the comment section for this episode on cinemaspection.com and start talking. Email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to cinemaspection@gmail.com. You can also like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Our show is available on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to us. And if you have a moment to spare, please leave us a review there. We appreciate any feedback you can offer. We'll be back to discuss another movie next time. Until then, thanks for listening. And remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than just what's on the screen. All right, anything else to say about Predator?
Get to the chopper!